This is possibly the most important episode I've ever recorded for this series. Today I'm going to share 3 things that you don't learn in creative writing classes. No one ever told me these things. No one talks about these things still, as far as I know. I had to figure them out for myself, and as far as I know, I'm the only one talking about them. But they're very, very important if you want to write a book and get it published. So let's go. The first thing they don't tell you in creative writing classes is how to write a novel. I honestly don't mean to throw shade by saying this, but in all of the classes I ever took on how to write a novel, I never actually learned how to write a novel. I'm not saying I didn't learn anything. I learned about craft, I learned about character development, I learned about starting a scene in the middle of the action, but none of these things are how to write a novel. Even when the class was called How to Write a Novel, I didn't learn how to write a novel. Eventually, I decided that this was probably for a few possible reasons. 1, maybe the person teaching didn't actually know how to write a novel, even if they'd written one before. 2, maybe the person teaching didn't know how to teach how to write a novel, even if they did know how to write one. Or 3, maybe the person teaching had never actually written a novel. Maybe they had edited one or written short stories, but they'd never actually written a novel. Looking back, this seems kind of obvious, but when you're deciding what novel writing class to take, I would suggest taking one from someone who has written a novel, not someone who has, experience in editing a novel, because that's different. But I also think just having written one isn't enough. I'd written a novel long before I actually had a process for writing one. And I had a process for writing one long before I knew how to teach that process and felt comfortable doing so. The problem is that when someone doesn't have a process to teach, they often are not sure what to do with class time. And so what they do with class time, in the case of creative writing, is to mimic the classes they took, which usually with creative writing is simply leading a workshop. A workshop involves the people from the class giving each other feedback on their writing. In my very opinionated view, it is essentially useless. And I know that that's a controversial statement, but I say this having been in these workshops for years and years and years. If you actually want to learn how to write a novel, you need to learn from someone who has written one, who has a process to teach you, and who has a track record of teaching it well. I mean, I guess it's no surprise that in the novel writing classes I took over the years, none of us actually wrote novels by the end of them. In the novel and memoir writing program I run now, 95% of people write their books by the end of it. I wouldn't be running a novel writing program if it didn't work. To me, if I were running a novel writing class or program and people didn't actually write novels by the end, it would mean I was doing it wrong. The second thing they don't tell you in creative writing classes is what actually matters the most in any writing you ever do. When I first started wanting to write a novel, I signed up for writing classes. Naturally, I hadn't actually taken one since college because I had a detour to law school, and my creative writing class in college had been a terrible experience. It had by this point been years since college, and I hadn't written any fiction since that terrible experience in college, not even a short story. So I was going from 0 fiction in like 10 years to writing a full-blown novel. I knew I needed classes, so I signed up for tons of writing classes on everything from how to write good sentences to how to incorporate humor to how to get published. And I probably rewrote my book about 12 times. And every single one of these classes, which was run as a workshop, people read excerpts of my novel, my peers, my teachers, and they all had feedback. I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments worth of feedback, but not a single time over 6 years did anyone say to me what the actual problem was. It wasn't until I was completely burnt out, exhausted with my book and with myself, ready to give up, because I could not find a literary agent who wanted to represent me. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong with my draft, that I finally made a choice that changed everything for me. I didn't know what else to do, so I hired a freelance editor and asked her, what's wrong with this draft? Why am I not finding a literary agent? And she read it, and she told me something that no one had ever said to me before, which was that you are not writing with heart. That's what she said. She said my sentences were near flawless. That was her exact wording, near flawless, but that wasn't enough. Until I wrote with heart, my book wasn't going to find representation and wasn't going to sell to a publisher. No one had ever told me this. No one talks about this in creative writing classes. And I don't know if it's because we're afraid of being cheesy or sentimental or talking about feelings, but we were always so focused on craft that no one had ever brought heart into the mix. I think people, and I include myself here, are often so worried about seeming, smart and talented that we overly focus on these sort of things that are tangential to whether our story is actually working, when really it's heart that matters. What does that mean? I mean showing up emotionally, feeling something as you write. If you're not feeling something, the reader isn't going to feel something. You are charting a path for the reader. You can think of yourself as the front man for the reader. Where you go, they go. And where you don't go, they don't go. So when I work with writers, I talk about heart all the time. How to find it, how to access it, how to work it into our writing. Because now I understand that it is the most important thing. It doesn't matter how perfectly crafted your book is. If it doesn't have heart, it's not going to transport someone who's reading it. And if it doesn't transport someone who's reading it, it's not going to sell. All right, before I share with you the most important advice I have for you today, I just want to invite you to apply to my program, the Book Incubator. The link is down below the video. It's only 2 questions. It'll take less than 5 minutes. If you're writing a book, you definitely want to check it out. Okay, now back to the video. The third thing no one talks about in creative writing class are the 3 mindsets. Back when I was taking creative writing classes, no one ever talked about modes or mindsets. I never heard either of those words ever mentioned, not once. We all talked about writing as if there were just one unitary mindset that you enter when you're working on your writing and you're just always in it. Now that I've written and published 3 novels and worked with dozens of writers, I understand that not only is this not true, but it's why so many writers get blocked and stuck before they even finish a first draft. It's also why so many writers do finish a first draft but keep rewriting and rewriting and rewriting without actually making it better. Okay, the truth is that there are 3 mindsets, and each of them has their role in your process. There's the writing mindset, which you want to be in when you're writing. There's the reading mindset, which you want to be in when you're reviewing your writing. And then there's the editing mindset, which you want to be in only when you are diagnosing how to fix what's not working in your writing. The problem is this editing mindset is the mindset that we tend to think should be in the driver's seat all the time. And it really has a very limited time and place when it's useful. If you try to write an editing mindset or you try to read an editing mindset, both of which most people do without realizing it, you're going to work yourself into a dead end because the editor is not very good at writing and the editor is not very good at diagnosing if writing is working or not because the editor always finds things that are wrong with a piece of writing, whether they are or not. The editor is like a hammer looking for a nail. It's like the Energizer bunny from those old commercials that keeps going and running into things even when there's nowhere to go. That's what the editor does. It comes in and it starts commenting on, a kind of crooked light fixture in a house when the foundation of the house is crumbling. It doesn't know how to distinguish what's working from what's not working. So when you're trying to figure out what's working in your work, you want to be in reader mode. Writing mode, letting the words flow for writing. Reading mode for diagnosing whether it's working or not. And editing mode only for trying to figure out how to fix what's already not working. Okay, if you made it this far, I'm guessing that you're writing a book or want to write a book. And if so, I would love to hear from you. When I'm not writing, my mission in life is to help writers write their dream books. I love it, I live for it. Because before I published my novels, I first had to figure out how to write one. And as you've heard today, it wasn't easy because none of the writing classes I was taking showed me how to actually write a novel. It wasn't until I had a newborn baby at home and very little time each day to write that I came up with a process. The process worked. I wrote my novel during my 8-week maternity leave, and now I teach it in my program, the Book Incubator. If you're curious to know more, I have a free video walking you through that process, and you can get it by just clicking below and answering 2 questions, telling me a little bit about yourself and your book or your book idea. You'll get the video whether you've joined the program or not. There's no pressure to enroll. I can't wait to hear from you.